Life will sometimes put you in situations that make no sense. You'll face doors that slam shut, people who walk away, and seasons where everything you touch seems to crumble. You pray, but the answer doesn't come in the way you expected. You try to move forward, yet you feel stuck in a fog of confusion. In those moments, it's easy to think, God, where are you? Why is this happening? But let me remind you today, just because you can't see what he's doing doesn't mean he's not working. God is not sleeping. He's not distracted. And he's not indifferent. He is weaving every thread of your story into a masterpiece that will work for your good and his glory. Sometimes in life, we get so caught up in the moment that our perspective becomes limited, like looking through a keyhole and trying to understand the whole room. We see only fragments, today's challenges, this week's disappointments, this month's unanswered prayers, and we assume that's the whole picture. But God doesn't see life in snapshots. He sees it in panoramic view, from eternity past to eternity future. He knows the beginning, the middle, and the end of your story. What feels to you like chaos is, to him, part of a carefully designed plan. When we're standing in the middle of pain, we often assume something has gone wrong. But God's plan is never disrupted by temporary circumstances. He is the master weaver, skillfully threading both joy and sorrow, victories and setbacks, into a tapestry that will ultimately display his goodness. This truth can be hard to grasp because our human perspective is so time-bound. We want instant results, instant answers, and instant clarity. If God says he has a plan for us, we expect him to reveal the whole blueprint immediately. But God knows that showing us the entire plan at once might overwhelm us, discourage us, or even make us run from our calling. So he allows us to see just enough to take the next step. The rest unfolds in his timing. That's why delays aren't denials. They are divine pauses that allow God to prepare both the blessing and the person who will receive it. A closed door might feel like rejection, but it could be God's way of steering you toward the door that leads to your destiny. In the Bible, Joseph's life illustrates this perfectly. As a young man, Joseph received dreams from God that showed him in a position of leadership. But before those dreams came to pass, he endured betrayal from his own brothers, was sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. From Joseph's limited perspective, in the prison cell, those years may have seemed wasted and unfair. Yet God was working behind the scenes. The betrayal positioned Joseph in Egypt. The false accusation led him to a prison where he would meet someone connected to Pharaoh's court. And when the time was right, in a single day, Joseph was elevated from prisoner to prime minister. And the very people who betrayed him came seeking his help during a famine. Joseph's famous words to his brothers: "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." are a testimony that God's plan was always bigger than Joseph's pain. This principle still applies to us today. You may be in a season where you feel forgotten, overlooked, or stuck. Perhaps the promotion didn't come, the relationship ended, or the door you were praying for slammed shut. From your point of view, it's a setback. But from God's point of view, it's set up for something greater. God may be protecting you from opportunities that are too small for your calling. He may be delaying the blessing so that when it arrives, you will be mature enough to handle it without it destroying you. He may even be allowing hardship because he knows it will develop the strength, faith, and resilience you'll need in the next chapter of your life. Think about a seed planted in the ground. If you judged its progress by what you could see above the soil, you'd assume nothing was happening. But under the surface, roots are forming, structure is developing, and life is preparing to break through. The seed doesn't resent the darkness or the dirt. It's simply in the necessary stage of preparation. Likewise, when you can't see God moving, it doesn't mean he's inactive. He is cultivating the unseen roots of your future. Here's a modern-day example. Imagine a young woman who dreams of starting her own nonprofit to help underprivileged children. She applies for funding multiple times, but every application is rejected. Frustrated and discouraged, she takes a job at a community center just to make ends meet. Over the years, she gains hands-on experience, builds relationships with local leaders, learns the challenges these children face firsthand, and develops the leadership skills she didn't have before. 10 years later, she gets the opportunity to launch her nonprofit. This time, fully equipped and with a network of supporters she met during her detour years. What once felt like wasted time was actually God's way of preparing her to succeed and sustain the very dream he placed in her heart. We may never fully understand why God takes us on the long road instead of the shortcut, but we can trust that his detours are intentional. The problem is not that God is late. It's that we are early in expecting the outcome. If we could see the panoramic view of our life as he sees it, we would thank him for every delay, every no, and every season that didn't go as planned. So the next time you're tempted to despair because life doesn't look the way you envisioned, remember, God's plan is not confined to your perspective. What looks like a dead end may be a redirection. What feels like a prison may be the passageway to your palace. The author of your story already knows the ending, and he has promised that it will work together for your good. Your job is not to figure it all out. It's to trust him step by step, knowing that the view from where he sits is infinitely bigger, better, and more beautiful than anything you could see from here. We often pray for blessings, breakthroughs, and strength, but we forget that these things rarely come wrapped in ease and comfort. In fact, Some of the very struggles we beg God to remove are the exact tools He is using to shape us into the people He has called us to be. Your struggle is not an interruption to God's plan. It is part of the process. Just like gold is refined in fire and diamonds are formed under intense pressure, God uses trials to refine and strengthen you for the greater purpose ahead. Without the challenge, you would not develop the capacity to carry the calling He has placed on your life. It's human nature to want quick fixes. We want patience, but we don't want to wait. We want faith, but we don't want to face situations that test our trust in God. We want courage, but we don't want to stand in the face of fear. Yet God knows that virtues are not built in comfort. They are forged in adversity. If you pray for patience, God will not simply pour it into you like water in a cup. He will allow circumstances that require you to practice waiting without frustration. If you ask for strength, He won't just hand you a supernatural surge of energy. He will place resistance in your path so you can build spiritual muscle. The very thing you're asking for will come wrapped in what looks like a problem, but in reality, it's preparation. Think about the life of David. Before he ever stood before Goliath, he spent years tending sheep in lonely fields. While it may have seemed like an insignificant job, that was where David learned courage, by fighting off lions and bears. It was in obscurity that his faith in God was strengthened. Without the struggles of the pasture, David would not have been ready for the giant. And without the giant, David would never have become the king he was meant to be. His journey shows us that the small, hidden struggles are training grounds for the larger victories ahead. Our problem is that we often see only the difficulty and not the development. When you're in the middle of a trial, it's hard to recognize how God is using it to build something inside you. But every hardship you endure, every disappointment, every betrayal, every long wait is doing something deep in your spirit. It is teaching you perseverance, compassion, humility, and reliance on God in a way nothing else could. Imagine an athlete training for a championship. The workouts are grueling, the schedule is relentless, and the coach is constantly pushing them beyond their comfort zone. At times, the athlete might feel like quitting. But those intense, painful training sessions are what prepare them to perform at their best when the big day arrives. The pain is part of the preparation. Similarly, God allows us to go through spiritual training so that when we step into the moment He has prepared for us, we have the endurance, faith, and wisdom to handle it well. Here's a modern example. A young man dreamed of becoming a skilled and compassionate doctor. He prayed that God would use him to heal people, but when he entered medical school, he was met with long nights, exhausting exams, and overwhelming pressure. There were moments when he wondered if he had chosen the wrong path. But over the years, The intense training not only gave him medical knowledge, but also taught him perseverance, empathy for patients, and the ability to stay calm under pressure. Years later, when faced with a life or death situation in the emergency room, he realized every sleepless night and difficult exam had prepared him for that moment. The struggle was not a detour. It was the necessary process to become the doctor God intended him to be. In the same way, your current trial is equipping you for something greater. You might not see it now, but there will come a day when you look back and understand that the very thing you thought would break you actually built you. What feels like pressure is shaping you. What feels like resistance is strengthening you. What feels like delay is giving you time to grow roots deep enough to sustain the weight of your future blessings. So don't despise the process. Don't curse the struggle. Instead, trust that God is an intentional craftsman who knows exactly how much pressure to apply and when to release it. He will not waste a single tear or a single moment of hardship. Every trial is a tool in his hand to mold you into the image of Christ and prepare you for the assignment he has for you. You may not like the process, but you will love the product. And one day, when you're walking in the fullness of what he has promised, you will realize it was all worth it. Life has a way of throwing us into moments we never expected and certainly never wanted. There are times when people betray us, opportunities, or tragedy hits with no warning. In those moments, it's easy to think that everything is falling apart beyond repair. The pain feels final. The loss feels permanent. The betrayal feels like the end of the story. But here is the truth. God specializes in taking what was meant for harm and turning it into something that works for our good. He doesn't just fix situations. He transforms them. What the enemy designs as a weapon to destroy you, God can refashion into a tool to elevate you. This principle is not just a hopeful idea. It's a reality woven all throughout Scripture. The clearest picture of it is the cross of Jesus Christ. From a human perspective, the crucifixion was the darkest moment in history. The sinless Son of God was beaten, mocked, and nailed to a wooden cross. The earth shook, the sky went dark, and it looked like evil had won. For the disciples, it was a shattering of everything they had hoped for. But what appeared to be the enemy's ultimate victory was actually the foundation of God's ultimate triumph. The cross was not the end. It was the doorway to the resurrection. Out of unimaginable pain came the greatest hope the world has ever known. God took the very thing designed to destroy and made it the means of salvation for all who believe. This is how God works. He doesn't just cancel evil plans. He flips them, redeems them, and uses them for a purpose that is far greater than the original harm intended. The story of Joseph in the Old Testament shows us this vividly. Sold into slavery by his brothers, falsely accused, and thrown into prison Joseph endured years of hardship, but each painful chapter moved him closer to the palace, where God would position him as second in command over Egypt. When famine struck, Joseph's leadership saved not only Egypt, but also the very brothers who betrayed him. His words to them sum up God's specialty perfectly. You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. The truth is, God's ability to transform evil into good doesn't mean the pain was imaginary or that the wrong done to you didn't matter. What happened may have been deeply unfair, and God sees that. But He is not limited by the intentions of those who hurt you. Their plan does not get the final say. His plan does. He can take the ashes of what's been lost and bring beauty out of them. He can take the wound and turn it into a wellspring of wisdom and compassion for others. Sometimes the transformation God brings isn't immediate. There may be a gap between the hurt and the healing, between the loss and the restoration. That gap can feel like silence, but it is often the space where God is working behind the scenes, rearranging circumstances and shaping you for what's next. This is where trust becomes essential. Believing that even though you cannot see how, God is still in control and still writing the story. Here's a modern example. A young man had a lifelong dream of playing professional sports. From childhood, he trained relentlessly, poured everything into his game, and finally earned a spot on a competitive team. But during a key season, he suffered a severe injury that ended his career before it truly began. For months, he wrestled with bitterness and confusion, convinced that his life's purpose had been stolen from him. But during his recovery, he began volunteering to coach local kids. What started as a small act of service turned into a passion for mentorship. Over time, he founded a youth training program that not only taught sports skills, but also instilled values, discipline, and hope in hundreds of children from underprivileged neighborhoods. Looking back years later, he realized that the injury that felt like the death of his dreams was actually the birth of his true calling. What the enemy meant to crush him became the very thing God used to impact countless lives. This is what it means for God to turn evil into good. It doesn't always mean the situation will look the way we thought it would, but it will always result in something that carries His signature: redemption, restoration, and purpose. The same God who turned a crucifixion into a resurrection, who turned Joseph's betrayal into a position of influence, and who turned one young man's injury into a mission field, is the same God working in your life right now. So no matter what you are facing, whether it's heartbreak, injustice, loss, or disappointment, remember that the story is not over just because the situation looks bad. Evil might write a chapter, but God holds the pen for the ending. One day, you may stand on the other side of what you are going through and say with confidence, "It hurt, but it didn't destroy me. It broke me for a season, but it built me for my purpose. The enemy meant it for harm, but God used it for my good. There will be moments in life when you can't see the hand of God at work. You pray and the heavens feel silent. You look for direction but find yourself in a fog. The questions pile up. Why did this happen? Why hasn't he answered yet? Why does it feel like I'm alone in this? In those moments, faith is tested at its deepest level. Real faith isn't believing when everything is going according to plan. It's choosing to trust when the plan is hidden from view. It's easy to have confidence in God when the bank account is full. The relationships are healthy and the doors are opening. But genuine trust is forged in the seasons when none of that is true. And you still choose to say, Lord, I trust you. Trusting God when you can't trace him means relying on his character rather than your circumstances. Circumstances can change overnight. Health can shift with a phone call. Careers can end with a decision you didn't make. People you counted on can walk away without warning. But God's character never changes. He is still faithful, still good, still sovereign, and still working, even when he seems silent. The silence doesn't mean he's absent. It means he is working in ways that are beyond your immediate understanding. Think about the life of Job. In one day, Job lost his wealth, his health, and his children. His friends offered shallow explanations, and his wife urged him to give up on God. But even in the middle of unexplainable pain, Job declared, "Though he slay me, yet will I trust him." Job had no idea that God was using his story to demonstrate faithfulness in the face of suffering to generations yet unborn. From Job's perspective, God seemed distant. From heaven's perspective, Job was in the center of a divine plan that would inspire billions. Often, God's hidden hand is protecting us from something we can't see or preparing us for something we're not yet ready to handle. A closed door today may save you from disaster tomorrow. A delay may be aligning people, resources, and timing for a breakthrough that will exceed your expectations. But because we see life moment by moment, we struggle to accept what we can't understand. That's why trust is essential. It's the bridge between our limited sight and God's unlimited wisdom. Here's a modern example. A woman had been working for the same company for over a decade. She was loyal, hardworking, and assumed she would retire there. Without warning, her position was eliminated during a round of layoffs. She was devastated, confused, and anxious about the future. For months, she sent out job applications with no success. It felt like God had gone silent. But during that season of waiting, she began volunteering at a local community center to pass the time. Through that work, she met people in the nonprofit sector who encouraged her to apply for a leadership position in a charity that served underprivileged families. She was hired, and within 2 years, she realized she had found her life's calling. She later said, If I hadn't lost that job, I never would have stepped into what I was truly meant to do. What felt like abandonment was actually redirection. God's hand was guiding her, even when she couldn't see it. Trusting God when you can't trace Him requires a decision to anchor yourself to His promises rather than your perceptions. Proverbs 3:5-6 tells us, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your paths straight." Notice it doesn't say, trust Him when you understand, but trust Him with all your heart. That means surrendering the need for immediate answers and choosing to believe that His ways are higher than yours, even when they are mysterious. This kind of trust also requires memory. When you can't see God in the present, remember how He has been faithful in the past. Think of the prayers He has already answered, the doors He has already opened, and the ways He has already carried you through storms. If He was faithful then, He will be faithful now. Sometimes you have to preach to your own heart. I don't see it yet, but I've seen Him before. I don't understand it now, but I know He knows what He's doing. In the end, trusting God when you can't trace Him isn't about denying the pain or pretending the confusion doesn't exist. It's about placing your hope in a God who sees the whole picture, even when you can only see a fragment. It's about believing that He's still holding your life securely in His hands, even when those hands are hidden from view. And one day, when the fog clears and the pieces come together, you will look back and realize He was there all along, guiding, protecting, and working it all for your good. There are times in life when it feels like the final chapter has already been written, and it's not the ending you hoped for. The diagnosis comes back, and it's not good. The relationship you thought would last forever falls apart. The dream you worked so hard for slips through your fingers. In moments like that, it's tempting to believe that your story is over, that this is all there will ever be. But God's word says otherwise. Romans 8:28 tells us that all things work together for good to those who love God and are called according to His purpose. It doesn't say some things. It doesn't say the easy things. It says all things. That means the wins and the losses, the laughter and the heartbreak, the mountaintops and the valleys are all pieces of a bigger plan that God is still unfolding. If it's not good yet, then God's not done yet. One of the most dangerous lies we can believe is that our current situation determines our final destination. Just because you're in a chapter of pain right now doesn't mean the whole book of your life will be defined by it. God is an author who never leaves a story half finished. What looks like the end from your perspective may simply be a plot twist from His. A closed door doesn't mean your calling is canceled. A failure doesn't mean your future is finished. God is still writing. And as long as you have breath in your lungs, there are still pages left to turn. The problem is, we tend to judge God's work too early. We see one scene and think we understand the whole movie. But God works from the perspective of eternity. He knows where the story began, where it's headed, and how every scene fits together. The heartbreak that makes no sense today may be the very thing that positions you for a breakthrough tomorrow. The delay that frustrates you now might be the time God uses to prepare you for what's coming. Just because you can't see the good yet doesn't mean it's not on the way. Consider Peter's story. On the night Jesus was arrested, Peter denied even knowing him. Not once, but 3 times. For Peter, that failure must have felt final. He had walked with Jesus, seen miracles, declared his loyalty. And then in the moment of testing, he fell. Shame must have told him it was over. But Jesus wasn't done with Peter. After the resurrection, Jesus restored him, giving him a chance to declare his love 3 times. The same number of times he had denied him. Not long after that, Peter stood before thousands on the day of Pentecost, boldly preaching the gospel and seeing 3,000 people come to faith in one day. What looked like the end of Peter's usefulness became the turning point for his greatest ministry. The chapter of failure was not the last one written. In the same way, your tears, your trials, and your losses are not wasted. God doesn't just work with the clean, pretty parts of your story. He weaves the messy, painful, and broken pieces into something beautiful. He's the kind of God who can take the ashes of your life and create something more radiant than you ever imagined. Sometimes all things in Romans 8:28 are the very things you wish had never happened. And yet, in his hands, they become essential threads in the fabric of your purpose. Here's a modern example. A young woman dreamed of being a teacher since childhood. She earned her degree, got her first teaching job, and was full of excitement. But after only a year, budget cuts eliminated her position. Heartbroken and unemployed, she wondered if she had misunderstood her calling. To pay the bills, she took a temporary position at a children's hospital, reading to young patients and organizing educational activities. Over time, she discovered a passion for helping children with long-term illnesses continue their education. That temporary job led to her starting a nonprofit dedicated to creating educational programs for hospitalized kids. Looking back, she realized losing her first teaching job was the very event that led her to her life's true mission. What felt like the end was actually the beginning of something greater. The truth is, no chapter in your life is wasted. Not the ones filled with joy, and not the ones drenched in tears. God uses them all. The pain may shape your compassion, the loss may sharpen your focus, and the detour may lead you to a destination better than the one you had planned. But to see it, you have to keep going. Don't close the book on your own story too soon. So if you're in a season where nothing makes sense, where the hurt is deep and the hope feels thin, remember this: God is still at work. He's not finished with you. The author of your story doesn't write tragedies without redemption or valleys without mountaintops. The ending he has planned is always good, even if the current page is hard to read. Hold on. Keep trusting. Keep turning the pages. Your story isn't over yet, and the best chapters may be the ones still to come. I don't know what you're facing right now. Maybe a storm, a betrayal, a heartbreak, or a season of uncertainty. But I came to remind you that God is still in control. He's taking every disappointment, every delay, every hurt, and every mistake, and He's weaving it into His divine plan. You might not understand it today, but one day you'll look back and say, if it hadn't been for that trial, I wouldn't be where I am now. God was working it all along. So lift your head, strengthen your faith, and keep walking. Because your story isn't ending in defeat. It's ending in victory. And God, He's working it all for your good.